I assume that the Washington Commanders are going to beat the Eagles this week because
What? Just because you're an Eagles fan?
Yeah, well, because I always assume that the Eagles will get the most painful outcome, and it would be more painful to lose to a division rival in the championship game, probably, than to lose to the Chiefs again in the Super Bowl.
Sure, yes, that would be more painful.
Hello, everyone. It's JVL. My best friend is out today, and sitting in for Sarah is Bill Crystal. Bill, I feel like you and I have been incredibly aligned over the last many years, but
Yes.
really over the last week or two, in our views about how it is sort of important for Democrats to oppose Donald Trump and act like an opposition party and try to damage him politically and lower his standing and try to hang some losses on him. This is what I want to talk about. This is the Andy Ogles thing. So yesterday, Andy Ogles proposed
He's a representative
constitutional, representative from Tennessee, and elected. He's in Congress, right? And so he proposed an amendment to allow Trump to run for a third term. So Trump himself has been talking about a third term since 2020. He was toying openly with the idea of, and I was treated so unfairly that many people are saying I deserve another term. And then he said, we will come to some sort of arrangement, and it'll be very strong, and you'll all be very happy with it. Yeah, we'll have a negotiation over third terms. He said it again. He did one denial of it where during the campaign where he said, no, I think this is my last one. But again, he says both sides of everything all the time. This is not dispositive. And then we had Steve Bannon tease it. Then we had Trump himself tease it. And everyone was like, oh, he's just trolling. You can't. I believe the people over at National Review got very, very upset when I was writing about how Trump is absolutely going to try to push the envelope on a third term. And talking, look how hysterical this is. Now we have an elected Republican who's proposing legislation to make it happen. And so this thing that everybody says it's crazy, it could never happen, and then it starts to happen in small ways, and they say this will never happen. The ways that it starts to happen get more serious, and they switch to, well, we have to let the legal process play out. This is for the courts to decide. And then once you get to the point where you're waiting for the courts to render their decision, the conservative and the Republican position will become, well, of course, he has to be allowed to have a third term because, it's anti-majoritarian and he had a clear mandate from the people and the Republican Party overwhelmingly wants to let him run again. And really, if you look at there's a comma in the Constitution, in the 22nd Amendment, that should be made to understand that it's consecutive terms that it's a prohibition against. And it is law of merited impossibility. It is this, and we just did this with January 6th with all these people. I forget which senator it was, but during Pam Bondi's confirmation hearing, I think some Republican senator was outraged that she would be asked about pardoning convicted violent felons from January 6th. Because it was ridiculous and nobody was talking about that and it would never happen and how dare you. And then it happens and the position becomes, well, of course it has to. It's the president. The president's allowed to do that. He has the pardon power. You're saying he's not allowed to exercise? That's his legal authority.
Yeah, it was Tom Tillis, I think, from North Carolina, the senator who said was trying to defend Bondi and said, well, of course you're not for that. The president's not going to do that. This is demagogic attacks on you by the Democrats. Let's see if Tom Tillis actually now, he's got Kash Patel next week. Patel has been an explicit defender of pardoning them all, including the violent ones. He promoted that J6 choir, which was full of violent criminals who were, one reason they were held in the D.C. jail is that they were dangerous, as the Justice Department said. Let's see if he holds this against Patel, that Patel was one of the main people who promoted something that he said shouldn't happen and wouldn't happen, and that did happen. Just on the birthright, as you were speaking, I was thinking about the birthright citizenship thing. We think Trump issued this thing, and people say, okay, what's going to be overturned? It's already been stayed temporarily. There'll be a hearing in, I think it's 2 or 3 weeks, and probably, be argued, and the judge will stay it, and then it'll go up the chain and whatever. Think about what's happening, though. Pam Bondi ducked the question at her confirmation, but she'll be confirmed, I suppose, and she will have the Justice Department, of course, defending the president's executive order, which means she'll have to tell various people down the chain, you need to write the brief, you need to do the research. All kinds of people in the federal government are going to be put in the position of, either being good, soldiers, if I can put it that way, or just obeying orders. Let me put it, I don't mean that in a sort of terrible Nazi way, but just in a kind of straightforward way, and defending a position that they know, as the judge said yesterday, is indefensible and so forth. But I don't know. I mean, some of them might to resign. Some of them might say, I can't participate in this and assign someone else. But it's not as if Trump issues the order and nothing happens then. The entire legal apparatus of the United States government will now be deployed on behalf of defending this order and every other executive order. That's how government works. The Justice Department defends the president's actions and the actions, incidentally, of cabinet officials. And so, I mean, it's this, and then people again are they're treating the executive orders as if this is Trump, writing something, and some of them aren't going to happen, and a lot of them are kind of far-fetched, a little confusing, but the whole government is now going to be enlisted, and it's going to be a good way to purge the government, incidentally. There's the 10 people at Justice who say, I just can't in good conscience make this argument as a lawyer, of course, as a what's the term? Not lawyer of the court, but officer of the court. I can't make an argument I think is totally false. And that'll be, where does that person get assigned in the Justice Department, or where does that person get assigned out of the Justice Department in the next week by, so I think, again, people are underestimating that. The point you make is very good about the way in which, I guess, the Overton window moves, if you want to put it that way too. But also, if the president of the United States is ordering these things, it suddenly becomes much more serious. The online mob could recede. There can be a counter mob that fights back, and that's happened to some degree against the online mob, and you get maybe a balance of power. I mean, here it's the U.S. government on one side, and a lot of state governments that will be sympathetic. No, I'm a little freaked out, as you can tell.
I would hope that if you're a lawyer at DOJ of conscience in this, you would not resign, because this is a useful way to purge the government, but you would do a Heisenberg, as he did during the race for figuring out how to split the atom, where I think most people think that there's no definitive verdict on this. But Heisenberg was purposefully making mistakes. He was working for the Nazis. He couldn't get out of working for the Nazis, but he didn't want them to win. And so if you're a lawyer in DOJ tasked with this, you should take the case and you should fuck it up.
But I mean, what do we think of I understand your point. It's very well, very said, very interesting and provocative. I hadn't really thought of it that way, but what are we saying? I mean, we're saying that we're in a situation like that's approaching genuinely being a civil servant in a authoritarian or despotic regime. Yeah. And that is terrible.
I just don't see any other way to look at it.
No, I'm not quarreling. I mean, I suppose it would be like being
No, I mean, just like the reality of where we are.
I mean, it'd be like being a police officer.
We are in the middle of an authoritarian attempt.
A police officer in the South in the 1880s or maybe the 1920s with the Second Ku Klux Klan, sort of ordered to let those guys go. They're friends of ours. The guys who killed those people, but they're our friends on the outside, or have a fake prosecution of them, or arrest these people who are innocent but they're black. So we're gonna. And what do? I mean, it's real. I mean, hopefully you don't do what they order you to do if it's terrible. But how do you get out of it? Do you undercut it? Do you resign? I mean, the degree of that to which that's going to have to happen, not just in the Justice Department, because again, there'll be all kinds of orders implicating the military. I'm told by people close to the Defense Department, and I don't fully understand this Northcom order, but people should look at it more, who know more. I mean, people are a little freaked out. I mean, you have an executive order now that's laying the predicate for ordering the U.S. military to use troops domestically or against invaders at the border. It's been such a bright red line that there's no use of the U.S. military domestically, except if you invoke the Insurrection Act, and that has its own, invocation that has to happen legally, and hasn't happened very often. But this creates another path to using it, and you just have to say invasion, and then suddenly and people are sort of, what do you do if you're the commanding general of Northcom? I don't know who he is. It's 4-star, I suppose. What do you do if you're the chairman of the Joint Chiefs? I mean, there are real problems. Pete Hegseth is Secretary of Defense. I mean, the whole thing it's kind of nightmarish, honestly.
Well, and this is why the Hegseth nomination I thought was so dangerous, because he's a guy who goes in there with with no loyalty to the institution, and his mandate is actually to make the leadership, which, I mean, frankly, is the level at which we ought to worry about the military's sympathy towards this authoritarian attempt. I think at the rank and file level, there are, I can't draw a pie graph of it for you, but I would say there's a substantial number of people at like the enlisted level who would probably be fine with authoritarian Trump. But that has not seemed to be true at the general officer level. Right. And Trump understands that as well, right? He's seen this up close with McMaster and Mattis and Milley. And that's what Hegseth's brief was, is to clear out the officer corps and make room for pliant generals at the leadership positions. Again, this is just unprecedented. This isn't how governance works. And you said this very well. This is a very well organized set of opening maneuvers that the Trump administration is performing. It's like they came in with a plan. It's a very well thought out plan. It has a bunch of pieces that can fit together, and it's ambitious. Like they knew who they wanted to fire. I mean, there is there is a room somewhere at Heritage or Mar-a-Lago or somewhere where somebody was going through personnel lists and finding, oh yeah, this attorney over here, we got to fire him. That's a level of detail that I think certainly was not there in Trump 1. And it's here now. It's all very
We
bad.
went crazy in Trump 1. Everyone went crazy, correctly, when he had the military clear out Lafayette Square and walked across to the St. John's Church with the Bible. And Milley apologized afterwards, and Secretary of Defense Mark Esper apologized, and that was kind of it. And that actually, I think, laid the fact that they did apologize and said never again helped lay the predicate for resisting Trump's coup in the Defense Department after November 3rd, even though Esper got fired 4 days after Milley was there. And Trump hates Milley for that reason. But again, think of where we were and where the defense leadership, both civilian and military, were, and others, even Republicans, were to some degree in the summer of 2020, and where we are now, 4.5 years later. And the lack, Hegseth is not going to be upset. As you say, the general officers, the senior military may be, but they could be moved aside. And again, the people are getting, and this time it's not just Trump telling you to do something. And like, what's the authorization for this? How are we clearing Lafayette Square? What military chain of command did that order come through? Now there's an executive order. There are 2 executive orders, and they haven't been overturned yet. No, the invasion one, I don't think is not in court because there's nothing to go to court about at this point exactly. And so there it is. It's a legitimate executive order. It's written up in legalese. It's issued by the White House, So yes, I mean, it's very worrying. Again, kind of for what could happen 2, 4, 6 months from now. Because I think in one of these cases, I guess on the Insurrection Act, this one game that I was on, game in the summer, to exercise in the summer of 2024, what Trump could do. We sort of had him suspending the Insurrection Act on the first day, but there's some obvious things. If you want to be an authoritarian president, you want to have the Insurrection Act at your disposal. Trump, in a way, I think pretty cleverly probably, he didn't think this up, but someone did. They've asked, I think it's DHS and maybe someone else, DOJ, to come back in 90 days with a report to the president on whether he should use the Insurrection Act. So they kind of took that off the table a little bit because people were kind of focused on that, and alarm bells really would have gone off if you'd done that on day one. But now, as the government's grinding along, they'll develop all kinds of arguments and reasons why it might be necessary. They'll wait for some incident somewhere at the border or in a city where some migrants or immigrants resist ICE attempts to round them up. And okay, here's the report. They say we have to do it. It isn't just, and again, it makes the whole government complicit in this. Who's going to write this report?
That's what he did with Rosenstein and firing Mueller.
Yeah.
Or Comey, right?
Yeah.
He told Rosenstein, "Yeah, go and write me a memo that tells me I'm supposed to do this."
Yeah.
I want to. It's all very dark.
Yeah, I know. I'm getting too depressed. Can we have 10 minutes here of slightly
maybe,
lighter?
No, we'll do that at the very, very end. But one thing that I failed to understand, I think everybody failed to understand. I don't think Trump's supporters realized this. I don't think Trump's opponents realized it. I know I certainly didn't. But the fact that hey Sarah, there's more show.
Oh, there is?
Yeah.
Are we still talking? We have more talking?
We're still talking. The talking goes on. But that's only for the people who are inside the Velvet Rope, the Bulwark Plus members.
Oh, they got to subscribe.
Yeah. Tell them to subscribe. Tell the people,
You should subscribe,
Sarah.
Guys. Why wouldn't you subscribe? You get all kinds of things. You get some extra me and JVL. You get some extra me and George Conway. You get JVL's Triad. This is one of the best things the Bulwark offers. I read it at least once or twice a week.
Yes. Go and subscribe. We'd love to have you.